Hi, so we'll talk about India and China. We'll talk about specifically the relationship that India and China share between each other. So this will probably be the last video of this entire series. We've talked about the history of China. We talked about the economic scenario of India and China. We've compared modern India and modern China in economic terms. We'll try to wrap up in talking about the politics and bilateral relationship between these two countries. So basically, we talk about geopolitical situation here. We also talk about history of conflicts and the 2020 conflict. So we'll talk about the geopolitical scene of these two countries at present. So we'll talk about India. So India and its relationship with different countries. We'll also talk about China. So to be very clear, this side we have India and this side we have China. So India is here and China is here. So we'll compare and contrast the relationship of India and China for all of these important entities. So first we talk about US and Russia because they were the two countries which were engaged in Cold War and they were very dominant for the last century. So India is improving its relationship with the USA at present. So earlier, during the Cold War, India was very determined not to be aligned with either of these two countries. It was slightly leaning towards USSR. It got the help of USSR more often than it got the help of USA. It had some trouble with the USA, but since the early 2000s, India has been improving its relationship with US. It started with the Manmohan Singh government and it has continued very well with the present NDA government. The NDA government, the political situation for them is that they want to have increased relationship with the US in general. So that is about USA. For China, the relationship was very good initially, especially in the economic terms. The China and USA shared a very deep economic relationship. USA was very dependent on China for a lot of different products, like we mentioned in the last video. But now the relationship is becoming increasingly hostile, especially after Donald Trump, because the focus was massively back on the huge trade deficit between the two countries. So we have an increasingly hostile relationship. You would remember the trade war between USA and China in the recent days. We have had historically friendly relations with Russia. They have helped us in a lot of things, especially in setting up different industries, in helping our nuclear technology, in helping our space technology and everything. But now the focus is more on the US-India relationship, and the Russian relationship is only that of an old friend. So it still depends. So we still depend on Russia for some key sectors. That includes defense to some extent. We actually purchased some defense equipment from Russia, and that is not sitting well with the relationship with USA. So that is one thing. Earlier for China, Russia was a huge inspiration. So it wanted to build its economy and political system based on Russia. If you remember from the previous videos, Russia was a socialist country and China was a communist country, and Mao Zedong was very inspired by Russia personally. So Russia was also an inspiration in the economic term, but China now clearly supersedes Russia in the entire region. China is so big now that it grants multi-billion-dollar loans to Russia at the present. So that is one thing. We have a really good relationship with all the Arabian countries because in some way it is essential for us. We need oil from those countries. So all the oil producing countries in the Arabian Peninsula, we are having a very good relationship. And the same applies for China also. China is the largest importer of oil from these countries. And China is also notably having increasingly close relationship with Iran. Earlier, Iran and India were very close, but the problem was that because of international pressure on Iran, especially from USA, India was not able to have a very close relationship. We have sort of stopped buying oil from Iran compared to previous years. But China is having increasing trade relationship with Iran. It is also investing quite a lot in Iran. So that is about Arabian countries and the Persian country. Good relations with Nepal, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh and Maldives. We have had historically good relations with Nepal until 2015. It was a monarchy until 2015. After 2015, when it became a constitution, the Communist Party in Nepal, they do not really have a very friendly relationship with India. But even now, Nepal depends quite a lot on India, and India considers Nepal to be an important ally. We have had good relations with Sri Lanka for most of the time. We have had some differences. Sri Lanka does not really support India in some multinational forums, but for the most part, we have had friendly relations. We have a very close relationship with Bangladesh. If you remember, it is with the help of the Indian Army that East Pakistan was liberated from West Pakistan, and it became Bangladesh. So we do have a good relationship with Bangladesh. We also have a fantastic relationship with Maldives. So it was slightly a problem a few years ago with a different president, but now we do have a friendly relationship, and we help Maldives to a very large extent. We've always treated Pakistan as the enemy in this country, because Pakistan also treats India as an enemy. So we've had a very hostile relationship right from 1947 with the split of Kashmir. So since then, the Kashmir has been the most important issue that remains unresolved between these two countries. While on Chinese side, China obviously has a very hostile relationship with just about every neighboring country. They have close economic relationship. So if you take Vietnam, for example, with Vietnam, China has a very good economic relationship. But all the Southeast Asian countries, they are wary of China's influence, and they do not really like Chinese influence. The most important issue that you will relate here is the dominance of China in the South China Sea. So that is one major point. Regarding Pakistan, China has a very close friendship with Pakistan. We'll talk about this later. It was not always this close, but after the war between India and China, Pakistan and China actually became very close. Pakistan is a strategic ally for China. So whenever India is very prosperous, India is doing very well, China will help Pakistan in some way to actually put pressure on India. And for Pakistan, it is a matter of survival. So Pakistan is not having international support in so many different arenas. So it needs the support of China to develop its technologies, to have more investments in the country. So that is the matter of survival for Pakistan. About Europe in general, we have had historical ties with UK. So even though we were ruled by UK, now UK supports us in so many different areas. And we also have a good trading relationship with the rest of Europe. This is very historical. We have had a good trading relationship for more than 2000 years. So that is one thing. China has an even stronger relationship with Europe. So China is the most significant export-import partner for the European Union in general. So there is a massive trade deficit which is in China's favor for Europe. So China's favor. So Europe is actually looking into it right now. In Africa, it is slightly far away from both India and China. It is quite far away. But most of the African countries, they view India as a very friendly country. They actually vote for India and vote for India whenever some topic comes up in the United Nations General Assembly. So that is about how India is viewed. But India is not able to invest significantly in Africa's development because we do not have that much money to spare. While China views Africa very strategically, so Africa has access to a lot of minerals which are not existing in the rest of the world. So, for example, uranium is there. For example, you also have lithium. So these are some resources which Africa is very rich with. But China is having a lot of money to spare, and it is investing billions of dollars in many countries in China, many countries in Africa. So some African countries have actually leaned towards China in the recent years. So that's about Africa. With Japan, India has had very close ties starting from even before the independence. So if you remember, Subhash Chandra Bose actually went to Japan to get its help in military endeavors. So Japan has provided massive loans to India for India's development. It has actually invested a lot in India, and it also helps in skill training in our country. That was even mentioned in the recent budget. For China, on the other hand, they have had historically poor relations with Japan. Like they were not really having a smooth relationship. Japan even occupied China to a large extent. But now, after 1950s, Japan has actually invested quite a lot in China, in technology, in capital. So and most of the manufactured goods of China also go to Japan. So about 11% of all the goods manufactured by China actually go to Japan. So they have a very deep trading relationship at present. Central Asia is a part of the world which is very rich in energy resources. So India is viewed as a friendly country in Central Asia, but we are again not able to invest much in it. But here in Africa, when we talk about China, Central Asia is very strategic because of its energy resources, and China actually has invested quite a lot of money into it. You can relate this to the Belt and Road Initiative of China. So this is a basic glance about how India is viewed and how China is actually working in the international scene. So we'll talk specifically about the ties between India and China now, and we're looking only the events which led up to the war in 1962. So the most important point to remember in this entire slide is that India and China were not always hostile with each other. They were initially very friendly, and they imagined their growth together as a phase in which Asia would dominate the world. So they were initially very friendly, but eventually few events led to war. So we'll see what those are. So first, India was among the first countries in the world to actually recognize the People's Republic of China. So India recognized the Communist Party, which actually won the Civil War, and India did not recognize the Nationalist Party. It immediately cut ties with the Nationalist Party. Under Nehru, there was a very friendly outlook of China in general, because you might remember from previous videos that Nehru was actually slightly leaning towards socialism. So he was not against communism too much. His defense minister, especially V.K. Menon, he was actually pro-communism to some extent. So that was about Nehru's outlook. And both Nehru and Mao Zedong was a leader of China, so they felt that India and China will form an Asian axis, and by the end of the century, they will actually start dominating the rest of the world. So that was the vision of the two leaders initially. So they had very friendly goals in the first decade. So the common negative experience was Western dominance. And they also had frequent references to how India and China dominated the world in the ancient and medieval period. There is this one major region in China called as the Tibet region. So Tibet is called as the roof of the world. It is at a very high altitude, and it is also the place where the Buddhist settlement is existing. So the Dalai Lama is actually from Tibet. But India, because of its Buddhist heritage, it started to have very close relationship with Tibet, and that was not taken well by China, because China felt that Tibet is an integral part of China, which India accepted to some part, but it still wanted to have some relationship with the religious leadership of Tibet. So in 1959, there was a huge revolution. There was a huge uprising in Tibet, because the Chinese forces were actually suppressing the religious elements in Tibet. So thousands of Tibetans had to actually flee Tibet, and they were given refuge in India. Most importantly, the Dalai Lama, who is religious head of all Buddhists in the world, he was given refuge in India, and he was almost forced to go out of China. So that is something that China was very angry with. From that moment on, China started distrusting India. So it felt that India actually had some grand plans in Tibet. India wanted to take Tibet for itself. So that was China's thinking, and China started distrusting India after that. Chinese response was to increase border presence massively. So they brought in a lot of soldiers to the borders of India. So that was one thing. India allegedly crossed the LOC all the time. So India wanted to have a forward policy after the 1959 crisis. It wanted to defend its borders. Also, Jawaharlal Nehru wanted to show that the country was not really weak. So he had a forward policy in which the Indian soldiers actually established some camps beyond the line of actual control. That's actually LAC. So line of actual control. So obviously, after the incident where Dalai Lama came to India, some skirmishes started, and in October 59, it led to the death of several Indians. So it started slowly, just like it started now in 2020. We remember 20 Indian soldiers were killed. So it started that way, but it was a series of clashes like that starting from 59 to 61. The Chinese premier at that time was Zhou Enlai. He came looking for a prompt resolution for the entire dispute, because the Chinese thinking was that it was not good to have India as part of its list of enemies. So China was already facing various conflicts with the US, and was having some problems with Russia also. And there was massive pressure from Russia to not have problems with India, because if China and India fight together, then eventually India might be tempted to go towards USA. So that was a concern of USSR, and it pressurized China to look for solutions. So Zhou Enlai came to our country. He had a proposition. So he said China will give up its claim for Arunachal Pradesh in turn for India giving up its claim for Aksai Chin. But that was completely refused by Jawaharlal Nehru. He said that he did not really want that sort of a solution, and it was not even allowed in the parliament. So in the parliamentary debate, the MPs, they wanted to show India as a strong country, and they did not really accept that. So one major point here is Even this continues even till day. China actually claims 90,000 square kilometers of Arunachal Pradesh till date, because Arunachal Pradesh is south of Tibet, and China considers Arunachal Pradesh to be simply an extension of Tibet. But for India, India claims the Aksai Chin because because Aksai Chin is a region in Jammu and Kashmir. We'll probably see that in the map next slide. So Aksai Chin is a region in Jammu and Kashmir which was considered to be part of the Kashmir Kingdom. So India claims some 44,000 square kilometers of Aksai Chin. So after these conflicts here, clearly the Chinese soldiers were not really happy, and they actually occupied very large parts of Aksai Chin. They did not recognize India's claim. To be very clear, both these regions are very scarcely inhabited. People do not really live there. It is very difficult to live there. The height of the location is very high. So Aksai Chin is mostly uninhabited even now. So yeah, that was that. Over the 2 years, tensions grew, and eventually it led to a brief 1-month war in 1962. So that war was very short, and China completely dominated India in that. Indian forces were not really high. Nehru did not even believe for a second that China would come to war with India, because he was still having a vision of India and China being together in dominating the century. So it was completely unexpected for Nehru. It was completely unexpected for the defense minister of Nehru. So that was that, and the Chinese, after a month of decimating Indian forces, they thought that they had really taught Nehru a lesson, and then they actually withdrew back to the original line of actual control. They went behind the de facto border. So this was basically a show of Chinese dominance. This was also the time when China was suffering with the Great Leap Forward and everything. So Great Leap Forward is basically, we've talked about that in the previous video. In the Great Leap Forward, it was a massive increase in resources and massive increase in agricultural productivity for China. The population increased quite a lot, but eventually it led to a death of a lot of Chinese people. So that was a massive catastrophe in China. So in that background, it seemed that China wanted to show its power, and it used this as an opportunity as well. So this was how the friendly relationship between India and China deteriorated, and it eventually led to a brief war. So how does the border look like? So this is the terrain map of India and China's border. So we look at this. It starts all the way from here. So we are at Jammu and Kashmir here. So it starts all the way from here, and the border extends. This entire region, is called as Aksai Chin. So this is a terrain map. So obviously the darker spots, they signify places which are at a height, and the lighter shades, they indicate places which are at the lower height. So the Himalayan mountain range starts all the way from Arunachal Pradesh. It goes from here, and then it takes a turn, and then goes all the way into Pakistan. Here, Aksai Chin is a region which is on the other side of the Karakoram range. So you have a mountain range called as a Karakoram range here. On the other side, you have a cold desert, and that cold desert is completely uninhabited even now, except for a road of China. So that region is called as Aksai Chin. So traditionally, India thought that this Kashmir kingdom, this entire Kashmir kingdom, it included Aksai Chin. That was India's thinking. But China had other plans. It felt that Aksai Chin was an extension of the Tibet Xinjiang region. So that was about the western sector. In the middle sector, India and China do not really have any serious conflict. We are completely fine with the borders in Uttarakhand. We are fine with the borders in Sikkim. We are also fine with the borders close to Bhutan. But after here, Arunachal Pradesh is an entire region. So China considers this entire region to be part of southern Tibet. So Tibet is here. We have Lhasa somewhere here. It is the capital of Tibet. And from there, Arunachal Pradesh is considered to be southern Tibet by China. But it does not really hold geographical sense, because clearly the border between India and China somewhat follows the natural border of the Himalayas. So all the way here, you have the natural borders of Himalayas. And here, the claim for Arunachal Pradesh does not really hold water. So that is about China's claim. So this is 90,000 square kilometers here, about 44,000 square kilometers here. So what is the present scenario? India has shown the map this way, including Aksai Chin and Arunachal Pradesh. But the present scenario is that China completely dominates this region. We do not have active control over Aksai Chin, but we do have active control over Arunachal Pradesh at the present. So that is how the border looks like. And because of the difference in perception, China obviously claims this Arunachal Pradesh to be itself. China also claims Aksai Chin completely. So there is a massive difference in perception. So if you ask what is the border length between India and China, the answer will depend on who it is coming from. If you are an Indian, you would say the border length is something like 3,500 kilometers. If you're a Chinese person, he would probably say the border length is 2,000 kilometers. So there is a massive difference in perception. So the India and China now do not even agree on what the actual border is. That is very far off. But we also do not agree on what is the line of actual control. So line of actual control and line of control for India and Pakistan, they are lines which actually indicate a status quo sort of a line. So they will talk about what part of the other side is going to be which country. So that is about the line of actual control. We do not even agree on the line of actual control, because obviously if you look at this terrain map here, it is completely, it is not very natural to have a border between India and China. There is a crude sense of border with the Himalayas, but when you come to regions here and there, you do not have a natural border. You cannot really agree on different watersheds. You cannot really agree on different mountain ranges. So there are a lot of conflict points here. So even the LAC is not really demarcated. So the recent conflict that happened between India and China, to be very clear, it is here. So this entire region, the slight bluish slash that you see here, that refers to the Pangong Tso Lake. So also we have Siachen Glacier somewhere around here, and there is a road going from Leh all the way to Siachen Glacier. So on the way here, there is something called as the Galwan River, and there is a Galwan Valley point there. And there, the major incident happened where 20 Indian soldiers were killed. So Pangong Tso Lake is something that is very long. It's a very long lake, and there are multiple finger points. The lake is something like this. It is something like this. So each of these regions, it's called a finger. So it is finger 1, it goes all the way till finger 14. So India claims that the border, that the LAC is at finger 8, but India effectively has control only till finger 2 or finger 3. So Chinese forces are actually coming all the way till finger 4. They've established camps at finger 4. So that is how it operates. So one other important thing that you need to remember here is that the border between different countries, the border between most countries in the world, they are not really properly demarcated. They have some natural way of, natural entity which actually demarcates the border, and the countries usually do not agree. So there is usually a buffer zone which is considered to be either the part of this country or the part of that country. So the problem here is we do not have a clearly demarcated border, we do not have fences, we do not have border posts, we have none of this. The only thing that Chinese soldiers and Indian soldiers do is that they patrol the borders very frequently with their forces. So Indian soldiers patrol here and Chinese forces patrol here. So when the patrolling happens, when the patrolling is done, there is obviously some sort of a standoff and clashes from time to time. So the clashes have happened for a very long time in this very long border. So here is a list of border skirmishes. It has been happening for quite a long time. It's not a one-time thing. So we had border skirmishes obviously in 1959, and it led to several deaths, eventually led to the 1962 border war. So the war was only for 1 month and China completely dominated India in that. We also have the 1967 Nathu La and Sho La clashes. So they happened in Sikkim. So this was before Sikkim came into India. Sikkim was initially a protectorate of our country, and it was not a proper part of our country. So in this border clash, the Chinese forces were defeated and they were actually forced to go back. In 1975, a major incident happened where 4 Indian soldiers were actually killed. So again, that was one major clash. 1987 was another very important clash. So this happened in Somdurung Chu Valley. In 2013, there was this Daulat Beg Oldi tension. So Daulat Beg Oldi refers to a road that is actually being constructed. It is already there to some extent. It starts from Leh, it goes all the way to Siachen Glacier. So that entire region is called a Daulat Beg Oldi sector. So that road is constructed, and this road is also very close to the Galwan Valley where the actual clash was happening. So India is frequently constructing bridges, India is frequently improving this particular road and all that. So in 2013, a major problem erupted. In 2014, there was again a major standoff in Demchok, again in the western sector in Ladakh. The 2017 Doklam crisis is something that you would probably remember. It was a tri-junction between India, Bhutan and China. So to make it very clear, concern of India for this particular thing, Doklam is somewhere here. So you have the state of Sikkim here, and here you have the state of Bhutan. Doklam is somewhere here. It's a small village there. So Chinese actually, they constructed a roadway all the way till this village, and they had a lot of soldiers building it quite further. And it had an immediate problem with Bhutan. So the Bhutanese Royal Army, they had a problem with that. And since it was close to a tri-junction, the Indian soldiers actually supported the Bhutanese soldiers, and the Chinese soldiers were eventually kept away because China wanted India to participate in an important international forum. So it did not want to pressure India too much. It was more of testing India's patience sort of thing. So the major concern of India here is, if you remember how India looks like, you have the major North Indian plain here, but then you have the northeastern states on this side, separated by a very small corridor here called as the Siliguri corridor. So it is also called as a chicken neck corridor. It is a vulnerable spot for India. On this side you have Nepal, Bhutan. On this side you have Bangladesh. So India is always worried about this particular corridor. It wants to defend it quite a lot. Even now, if you go from here all the way to Sikkim or to northeastern states, there is a major checkpoint in this particular spot. So China had come very close. It had actually occupied Doklam, and India did not really want to have that stronghold given to China, because eventually that will be one very important strategic advantage for China. So India was very opposed to that, and there was a major crisis in Doklam for about 1 or 2 months. Yeah, so that was about Doklam crisis. The 2020 border crisis is also something major. We'll talk about that in an entire slide. So the escalation obviously started in May 2020. 20 Indian soldiers were killed. Unconfirmed number of Chinese soldiers were killed in the clashes. China said that it did not really want to hurt India's sentiments, and it did not want to prolong the situation. So it did not confirm the number of soldiers killed. So that was one thing. Political rhetoric in both countries. So the political leaders in both countries kept bragging about how their country is really good. So the Indian leadership also talked about how India is very different now, and India is not going to lose if there is a war. And the Chinese obviously, they talked about how India was humiliated in the previous war. So in September 2020, also the first shots were fired in 45 years, and the use of clashes is basically as a pressure point. We'll look at that. So 2020 clashes, obviously May 2020, and it started and it aggravated throughout May. It was very serious in June. So it aggressively built up its military in the border, leading to face-offs and skirmishes in Pangong Tso and parts of Tibet also. So it's not only the western sector, also in the eastern sector in Arunachal Pradesh, China has actually constructed 1 or 2 villages. It has been investing quite heavily in one particular village. So that is also a problem. On the night of 15th or 16th, the intervening night, reportedly Chinese soldiers with iron rods and batons wrapped with barbed wire, they had actually attacked quite a lot of Indian soldiers. It is said that more than 600 soldiers from both sides were involved, and about 20 Indian soldiers died. Some of them died on the spot, some of them died because of hypothermia, because the conditions are very cold in that location, as you might know. And some Indian media outlets, they have estimated that as many as 43 Chinese soldiers have died, but these are only estimates. It's obviously not confirmed by China. And the clash took place near the fast-flowing Galwan River. So that is also a problem. Many Indian soldiers were pushed off the ledge, and they died because of injuries. So why did China actually start this? What is the cause of this entire thing? So China is following something called as a salami slicing technique, where it takes up very small territories from the neighbor over a very long period of time. So year by year, it takes a very small chunk, and eventually it establishes that as a line of actual control. And over a very large number of years, the border of China would have actually increased. So that is the salami slicing technique of China. It follows that with just about every other neighbor. It does that even in South China Sea. So Chinese reports to India's border area development. So Chinese response to India's border area development. So obviously both these countries are developing. Like I mentioned before, border areas are not really developed. They are very lonely areas which are not having any signs of development, any signs of inhabitation. So the border area development is very important for any developing country. And with India and China rapidly gaining wealth, it is both the countries are actually investing in border infrastructure, especially in constructing roads and bridges, in creating military infrastructure and all. So with this was kind of like a Chinese response to India's border area development. It is also a show of strength amid the pandemic. China was viewed very negatively starting from January 2020 because of the pandemic, and China wanted to show that it was still strong. So it was basically a show for itself, where it tries to convince the citizens of the country that China is not losing anything out here. The one most important reason probably is in August 2019, the Indian government decided to abrogate Article 370. So Jammu and Kashmir was made into two union territories, and India actually released a map. So that particular map was very problematic with China, but not just with China, it also had problems with Nepal. If you remember, the Kalapani dispute is because India actually published the new map, and Nepal took up the new map as an excuse to actually fight with us. That is one major cause probably. So the Indian map did not really sit well, especially because the Indian map included the entire Aksai Chin region. India's growing alliance with the US. So this happens quite a lot. The problem, like I mentioned in the geopolitical scenario, India is getting more and more closer to the US, and China is having more problems with the US, and US is a very influential and powerful entity. So if India becomes very close with the US, and if it actually forms military alliance with the USA, then it is going to be a problem for the dominance of China, not just in the South China Sea, but also in the Indian Ocean. So in the Indian Ocean, China is trying to gain some influence, but till now it is not able to. If India is able to form some alliance with the USA, it will definitely not able to gain any influence in the Indian Ocean. And also Chinese influence in the South China Sea might actually diminish. So China is really worried about the growing alliance with the USA, and it is probably trying to pressure India with all these border incursions. And this entire thing is also part of the pattern of Chinese assertiveness with growing power. So, if you remember, after April and May 2020, China has been very assertive in just about every border that it has. So it was having a major clash with India. So that made international headlines. But it also had major clash with countries in South China Sea. While the countries in Southeast Asia were struggling with the pandemic, China was continuing its expansion in South China Sea. It was actually building new islands in South China Sea. And China was also increasingly assertive at Taiwan. So Taiwan is considered to be part of China by China, it's a Chinese government. But Taiwan is actually independently governed to some extent. So in mid-2020s, China was actually sending military reconnaissance flights into Taiwan. So that was about one assertiveness example. So it might be a pattern of the assertiveness in general. Multiple local leaders. So what is the present scenario? Multiple local leaders near the LAC in Ladakh have actually expressed their concern. They said that for years the Indian government has actually neglected border infrastructure and border manning. So Indian soldiers were not adequately present in the border, and even if they are present, they have very scarce resources. That is what some local leaders have said. And they also mentioned that Chinese soldiers have actually encroached upon a very large part of Ladakh over the last few years. So that is a major cause of concern. But the official narrative from the Indian government is that China has actually not transgressed into our country, and we are still holding control of all the major points and all the high points. So this is about the 2020 India-China border crisis. We talked about the geopolitical scenario of these two countries, about what the leaning is towards different countries. We also talked about the events leading up to the 1962 war and why there is a border clash between these two countries fundamentally. And we have also particularly seen the India-China border crisis. There is also one other point here, one other cause that could probably be added to this. The cause is not really formal, but what some people say is that China uses this border as an issue whenever India is having some relationship with China's enemies. So that is probably one of the important reasons. So we mentioned US here, but it need not be the case. Whenever China actually acts on this border, whenever China encroaches upon the border, it wants some sort of concession from India, and it has a higher negotiating power if it creates problems in the border. So that is about the entire Chinese approach and this entire topic. So hopefully we'll wrap up this entire series with this last video. Thank you for watching.